So this past weekend, we had two senseless killings, one of a military veteran, 34 years of age, and a teenager, 16 years of age. What the two victims have in common was this: they were enjoying themselves. They had no connection with the individuals who took their lives. Mr. Joseph Torres was simply walking between a group of individuals when someone in a group was offended by it. In the process, others in the group began beating Mr. Torres, and as he was trying to get away, the original instigator shot him multiple times, killing him in the middle of downtown Orlando. Ms. Tavai King, an Evans High School student, was riding in a car when shots were fired, striking her. Earlier in the evening, she had attended a gathering. The car she was riding in was at the Wawa gas station, and it appears it had been the target of the shooter. She was enjoying an evening with friends. That's all she was doing. In both cases, the individuals responsible for their death did not care for their consequences or their actions. They were deliberate in their efforts to hurt another human being. They did not care who would be hurt by their actions and caused the death of two innocent people. While these two incidents have gotten some attention, there was another incident this past weekend at the Majestic Lounge on North Junyan Parkway. During an argument in the VIP area, a male pulled a gun and fired in the direction of another male, striking an innocent bystander, a female, in the chin. Thankfully, the injuries are not life-threatening and she will recover. She was not involved in the argument, but was affected by the actions of an individual who did not show concerns for the consequences of his actions. This investigation is also ongoing. During the first 3 months of 2021, a number of cities across our great nation have seen an increase in violent crimes. Homicides and shootings are up. So far this year, we have seen an 18% increase in shootings compared to 2020 in our area. I have mentioned my concerns for the uptick in violent crimes in the past, especially shooting incidents. As a community, we continue our efforts to address policing and social inequity concerns, and rightly so. But we cannot ignore the violence which is claiming innocent lives and affecting the quality of life in some of our neighborhoods. The conversation we need to have will undoubtedly be uncomfortable for some, but we must work together. We must work together with our citizens, government, community stakeholder, clergy, our judicial system, our media, and others to properly address this issue. We must do our best to prevent individuals from engaging in violent activity and hold those who are committing those incidents or those acts accountable for their actions. With the same passion, we have come together to address social injustices. Our community must come together to voice our disapproval against the violence which is affecting some parts of our community more than others. According to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, since 1995, over 2,000 individuals have been murdered in Orange County, an average of 90 homicides per year for the last 10 years. This does not include the thousands who have been injured during shooting incidents. That's 2,000 fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, children, friends and neighbors, nieces, who have been affected by these actions. A military veteran and a youth in their prime have been affected by violence this past weekend. Enough is enough, and we must come together in our efforts to address this concerning trend. With that said, the Commissioner is not going to make a statement, but if anyone has any specific questions for any one of us up here, please feel free to ask them now. So our investigators are looking into those details. Again, this is very fresh. There was a gathering that she was attending with friends, but I think the important messaging here is that regardless of what that gathering was and who put that gathering together, someone at that gas station didn't think twice about shooting into a car that was filled with other people, and she was victimized and had no connection with the individual whatsoever. So that's part of the investigative process. We're not ruling out the possibility that the vehicle itself was targeted in the process, but we have to verify that during the investigation.
Chief,
So here's the thing. We are constantly doing that. Every time we see any trends, any shifting in crime activity, we do that proactively. But I think we have reached a point where this is beyond just law enforcement responding to shootings. This is the community coming together, obviously with the support of our elected officials, all government entities, and part of the judicial process, of course, also involved, to address the fact that we need to start working early on in prevention for these incidents to occur. When you have a young person who's getting involved in certain activities that could potentially yield them being victimized as a result of their association or their embracing of an idea to being part of something that is against the law, we all have a responsibility and a duty to address that. But we have a community responsibility to doing so. It just can't be one or two entities involved in the process. Just as we have come together again, as I mentioned, to, and rightly so, to voice our concerns for some of the injustices that we have seen in our country and some of the injustices that, have affected our community as a result of our actions from the law enforcement community. We also need to take a strong stance against violence. And that is something that I don't think we have seen to the extent that we should. How many more lives do we have to lose? How many young people do we have to lose in the process? We have to target our high schools, our junior high schools early on to prevent those souls, those young people who may be enticed to follow someone in the wrong path, to encourage them not to do that, and also to send a clear message that if you're involved in certain type of or in violent activity, you will be held accountable for your actions. And to a certain extent, it seems like people are not concerned for their for the consequences of their actions. That's the troubling part.
We've already addressed this, but my question is the driver cooperating? Have you got anything from the other passengers that were in the car?
So the investigators are making progress in the investigations, and but again, we're within that 48-hour period, but they're making progress.
What's your word for the shooter? The Wawa and where she was found?
So I guess there's some different messaging going on as far as what happened and when we found her. At 044, meaning 12:44 in the morning, we received the first call that someone had been injured. Officers were already responding to the Wawa, but we received the call that someone had been shot. And within 1 minute, one of our sergeants rolled up on it. It was that quick.
At the Wawa?
No, outside of the Wawa. She was transported away from the Wawa, and we found her away from the Wawa.
Was she in the car? Was she in the car?
So the investigators have asked me not to relay certain information. She was in a car at one point, and we found her near the Wawa. Is what I can disclose at this point, out of respect to the detective.
Was she shot in the car?
She was definitely in the car when she was shot. Yes.
Chief, it sounds like someone knows something. So what's your words to the people who just aren't saying anything, aren't speaking up? What's your words to those people?
These two cases are not unusual when it comes to that. In most cases, unfortunately, the information doesn't come as quickly as we wish. But we are seeing a trend where people are becoming more involved in providing assistance, right? So we applaud our community for doing that. Do we have a lot of progress to be made when it comes to that? Absolutely. Often not, when we arrive at a scene, some people are more inclined to record someone who's dying to actually provide him first aid. I mean, how troubling is that, right? So at the same time, some people who have seen these situations unfold are more inclined to just say, I don't want to be part of it, than to stick around and say, look, this is the information that you need to solve this case. We get it. It's not that plain and simple. But we have mechanisms in place so that if someone has critical information concerning a homicide, especially, they can do it so that their information remains anonymous. And those are the kind of things that we need to continue to work on to promote those type of paths where someone can help us solve these crimes and yet feel that they won't, and make them comfortable in the fact that they won't be targeted in the process.
And she was 16 years old, and as we're approaching the summer, we've had a couple of other teens killed recently. Are you concerned about the recent teens that have been killed, and if so, what's the plan of action?
Anytime you have any human being who has been lost as a result of a violent offense, of course, it should be a concern for the community as a whole. I don't think age matters when it comes to that. Yes, it is troubling when a youth is affected, especially a youth had no connection for the most part with the person responsible for an incident like that. But it goes back to the point that this has to be a holistic approach. It is the community and every stakeholder who feels that they can make a difference in our community coming together to support each component to address the needs of our youth, to address the needs of every citizen who resides here in our community. We all have got to come together to address this, and nothing will be done overnight. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take some very uncomfortable conversations, but we have to come together in order to address this.
Do you feel gangs were involved in either of these incidents?
I'm sorry?
Do you feel gangs were involved in either of these incidents?
We have had a high number of incidents that involve particular groups that we have talked about before. Are we continuing to work? Actually, we're working with our federal partners and everyone for that criminal element who's out there listening to or will listen to this. Rest assured that we're doing our part to try to identify those responsible or leading these groups. And we will do our best to hold them accountable for what they have caused in our community, especially here in the last year or so. How many? We will get you the numbers as to, when it comes to our homicides, how many of them have been are being linked that we know of at this point to gangs.
So you're linking the two from this past weekend to gangs or no?
No, we're not ready to say that. Yep. So.
How many officers do you have patrolling downtown over the weekend, specifically on Avenue? Is there anything that they could have done to maybe prevent this?
No. Officers were within 100 feet of where this incident occurred. Within 100 feet. And this person did not care and took the action that he did against this other human being. So the Orlando Police Department today, percentage-wise, based on the number of officers that we have more officers in patrol today than we have ever had any time in the past. We have modified our resources so that we have more officers during peak hours, which include during the bar time, the nightclub periods or night times in the downtown areas. We have extra watch squads. We have a detail that is specific to work the downtown detail. We're very blessed also to have a business community, especially in the downtown core, that has a tendency to hire extra duty officers to supplement security needs. There were officers everywhere. There are cameras everywhere in the downtown area. Yet this individual felt compelled or felt empowered to come into the downtown area with his friends with a gun and take the action that he took.
Regina, can I ask you a question, because I have known you so long. Your heart has to be completely for your niece, and in 2017 when it's on.
Well, of course, my niece's mother's devastated. The family's devastated. And yesterday was a tough day. A lot of things compound. But then I woke up this morning also realizing we're not the only family. There's multitudes of families that's grieving in the county and in the city. And me, in leadership, must think about how do we stop the killing. And I do believe that hurt children are hurting children. And my focus as chief and our great officers and detectives do their work, I'm going to leave the enforcement to the enforcers and the punishment to the judicial system. But when it comes to social programs, as the chief said, prevention, thought of a model: prevention, intervention, and recovery. We have babies now killing other babies. What do we do for those hurting babies? How do we address the trauma that they've continued to see in the funerals of their friends and their actions and behaviors, How do we address trauma? And then how do we see children that might be reaching that fork in the road, Chief? How do we come together as a community and intervene? so that those youth won't now become murderers, so that mothers and grandmothers and aunties and uncles would have to stop bearing the young versus them bearing us. So that's where we are as a family. We're grieving. So a lot of people was impacted yesterday morning, in the mornings and the evenings before, by these murders. It doesn't just impact the family, it is now impacting the whole community, school systems. What about the kids that sat next to TT when they went back to school this morning? And she no longer will be in that seat giggling and laughing and loving with them. She was an honor student. She had desires to be a veterinarian. She loved pets, especially dogs. She was always bubbly and goofy and giggly and such a big help to her mother and with her younger siblings. Just a good little girl that was, you know, just because of the investigation, I want to say too much about that evening out of respect for the detective's work. But yes, she was at the wrong place at the wrong time, doing kid things. It's devastating, but my heart also goes out to the other families that have been impacted in the last 3 weeks, a few youth murders. And how am I going to help those parents that might have trauma? Another child that goes inside of a classroom filled up with other trauma victims, from utero to 16, 17-year-olds. So that's where we're at. We're not talking about OGs, as you say, gang members. We're talking about cliques, and we're talking about little children that just came out of being a preteen. These aren't 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds. These are children under than 18. That's killing. You know, I thought about my grandson that I'm raising. And I thought about the games that I thought were innocent that I'm letting him play on his PlayStation, which is Fortnite. Nothing against Fortnite, not trying to say anything about it. But they got a little game I kind of walked in and saw. And I said, oh, I don't like him playing that game, but I walked out. And it was him virtually now in this virtual room with other 8 and 9 and 10-year-olds playing Fortnite, and they'll shoot at the little target, and they'll run and they'll jump up. They'll run and they'll jump up. And I think somewhere along the way that our children that have been playing these games now for at least 10 years or more, or less, have become desensitized to where now they have a real gun versus a virtual gun, and it's easy to pull the trigger because their little brains have been conditioned to pull the trigger virtually. But this is real life. People don't get up. And so how do I deal with that, and who do I reach out to help me desensitize our children of walking by a murder scene and seeing a body? How do I desensitize them from the programming of innocent games? Not games, but games. So we do have a crisis. I know the chief and Mayor Dyer and our clergy and our great leadership. I asked our chief of staff, could we revisit a program that we started investigated a long time ago, and I thought was a great model, and that was Operation Ceasefire. And so I'm going to be revisiting that, and hopefully with Chief, and I know he's always supported any effort when it came to youth gun violence, and not just punishment, but recovery, intervention, and prevention.
Just to follow up on one thing you said that when activity tends to happen, you kind of look at the data where things are going. However, do you believe you have enough men on the ground, women on the ground for that matter? The ratios, I mean, there's thousands of people on Orange Avenue in downtown. And I mean, are you hoping for 300 to 1, 200 to 1? What's the ratio? Because a lot of people say it's too many people, not enough law.
There is enough law. I think the issue is individuals' actions and what they're choosing to do in an environment that really does not and should not tolerate that type of behaviors. People bringing that behavior to an area where the majority of the people are enjoying themselves, they're having a great time, they're not doing anything, obviously, that raises any concerns, but those few who go into that environment that are causing the most egregious actions, that's what we need to be focused on. We need to be focused on our messaging that says you should not go into this area armed with a weapon, or you shouldn't go into this area expecting to fight someone and take the type of action that we saw this weekend. I think that's part of the thing that we have to work on. The city of Orlando has been very, very gracious in the fact that they have supported our police department to create a state-of-the-art crime center, given us from 4 analysts that we had 2 years ago to over 10, another 2 coming on board, 12 analysts, for us to be able to then dive into the information that we collect, to better deploy our resources. We're doing everything with the support of Mayor Dyer and Council. This goes beyond just having the resources to respond to these issues. It calls for action, and again, and it's just my personal opinion, but I believe that unless we come together as a community to address these issues, then we're not going to make any progress. There is a lot of informal leaders out there that have the power to influence others. We need to bring those individuals, but we need to bring the right individuals to the table to have these discussions. The discussion cannot be derailed so that we can start moving towards a different direction when we're trying to come up with ways to address violent crime. The issues involving law enforcement have been heard and have been heard loudly, right? We take into account the fact that change is needed and change is in the works, is coming. It's already there in most cases for the Orlando Police Department. But when it comes to this particular topic, this is the focus of that conversation, in my opinion. We need to have that with the right people at the table so that we can start addressing our proactive efforts to try to move an individual who may be on the wrong path away from that type of lifestyle, and for those that are already in it, to give them an opportunity to stop what they're doing. But when someone does something to this extent, to hold them to the maximum allowed by law as far as the consequences for their action, and they be clear on the fact that if you're going to commit this type of crime, then you should expect everything and anything in the books thrown at you as a result of your actions.
Chief, you said that the shooting in downtown Orlando in the last month.
Hold on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Second shooting downtown Orlando.
Yeah.
In the last month. The last one was right there on Pine Street. There are groups of people around. Is it safe to go out in downtown at this
It is. It is safe to go downtown. The problem is, again, it's not the bulk of the people that go downtown, are the certain small group of individuals who think they can come into a setting like that and actually have shown that they're not afraid for what actions they may take. But for the most part, we literally have thousands and thousands of people that come into our downtown core who come and go without any issues whatsoever. But it's that small percentage that we need to focus on. And to the point of, that we have enough presence in the downtown area, absolutely. Think about this. In both of those incidents that you described, officers were within feet of those situations. But yet, and it's not just Orlando, this is a national trend that we're seeing in major cities. Just recently, there's a report that came out for major cities that talked about violent offenses. And of course, these are big cities, New York, Chicago, LA, through the roof when it comes to the number of incidents that have occurred. Chicago, 18 homicides in one weekend, right? So it goes to show that there seems to be a trend that is affecting, in most cases, the youth that are getting engaged in this type of activity, but this community is not the only one being affected by this. Now, we as a community have a responsibility to best address it here with our people, because it's our community, all of our community, right? So I think that's my ask would be that we please engage in a process where we can find a viable option. And the option that the commissioner brought up, it's an awesome program. It's an investment, though. It's an investment, and it takes a lot of money to put that particular program together. But whatever it is that in the future we think is best for our community, I think we need to get together to try to figure out that path. Again, I am a strong believer that we do have individuals that are the informal leaders of our community that have a lot of power to influence others, especially the clergy. I mean, especially the clergy. They can help us in this process, and you have a lot of neighborhoods association that can help us in this process. We have to engage our youth. And again, it's going to take all of us to do that. So let me do this. Los medios latinos, lo que voy a hacer es, tan pronto terminemos, yo voy a hablar con ustedes específicamente para entonces darle todos los detalles que hemos hablado. ¿Ok?
You said that the two victims in this case did not have any connection to the people that took their lives. I know you're limited in what you can say right now, but what can you tell us about the setup?
I'm going to use the downtown incident as an example. You have a 34-year-old veteran who had gotten 2 empanadas at a restaurant on Wall Street, decided to walk back to his car, happened to be a crowd there. He was walking through the middle, and someone was upset because he was walking through them. And that led to a fight, which led to a shooting, which led to a death. This guy had no clue who these people were. Probably those individuals had no clue who he was, but yet it elevated to that extent. No connection between the two, except you have one individual who felt empowered to take the life of another human being simply because he initially was upset that he was coming through their crowd. That's unacceptable.
Can you say if these people are in custody right now?
No. Again, as in any investigation, especially during the first 48 hours, that's the critical period, our investigators, I don't even know if they have had much sleep since they started working these cases. But they're soliciting any input that the community may have. They're still combing through video files that they have obtained. They're still going through our system, private sector systems when it comes to video. A lot of work is being done. But if anyone has any information as it relates to these 2 cases, we ask them to please call us or call Crime Line and give us the information so we can follow through. With that said, thank you everyone very much, and then I'll address the Latin media at this time. I'm sorry? He was